I do consider myself a visual learner. I think learning through, looking at either be it a flow chart or a web diagram or a piece of art or a video, it just is less intimidating and it's more inviting, and it makes it easier to learn. I definitely prefer learning through visual mediums as compared to just reading a written text.
Yeah, I do consider myself a visual learner. I think I discovered this when I was in school, because I used to remember which part of the book the information is from when I'm trying to recollect the part of information. So I realized that I learn more through seeing things. For me, it's through something other than words. So it could be something that I look at to learn better. Maybe like in the most obvious and common answer would be like when you're learning science. When you're looking at cells to understand, you look at like into a microscope to really understand what's going on. So something like that. Or something like in law, when you need to understand the hierarchy of directors or understand complex structures of companies. If you could put that in a flow chart or in a structure, then that is also considered as visual learning for me.
I'm someone who mostly like uses, as I said, videos or infographics to understand complex concepts, because otherwise it's just really hard for me to retain. Like, I could read a book 5 times, but I'm someone who prefers reading like graphic novels or something with a visual element attached to it. Like, even when I'm taking notes in a class, there's usually a lot of doodling about like the concepts that I'm doing.
I like paintings, so I think if I like any sort of like art in that sense, like whether it's like sketches or paintings. I've been trying to learn how to do like urban sketching.
Yeah, I do consider myself a visual learner. I find it easier to think in color and images rather than numbers and words. And like I articulate my thoughts through writing, but I try and think of it visually. I think visual learning is just a form of assimilating the world around you. Like, usually I find it very easy to think through my camera because my judgment from the world is detached, because now it's the camera's world. So I can sort of look at the composition, framing and colors through that and sort of learn about it. Like, I find it easier to fall in love with people through photos of them rather than them standing in real life with me. So I think that's what it means to me.
Growing up, one of my favorite subjects was art. And obviously that's a very visual subject because you can express your emotions or whatever subject matter it is that you want to convey through an art piece. So yeah, growing up I really enjoyed art, and that's why I pursued my bachelor's in visual arts. But I also remember when I was younger, I really enjoyed environmental studies. Also because it would include a lot of videos and a lot of diagrams when they would teach you about like the water cycle or rain and things like that. And on the other hand, I really enjoyed biology, and again, that's I think is because there were a lot of visual elements and diagrams that you could use to aid your learning. So I really liked biology as well.
I liked biology a lot, and that's because I really liked drawing. And since my interests lies in art, even though I didn't like science as a subject to study because it wasn't taught that way, in a way that we could understand easily, biology is something that we could really connect with because it wasn't very abstract. We could see like a leaf and then see the cells. We could see like something that is placed under a microscope, or even in your record books when you have to draw something, it was very obvious what we are learning about. So that visual aspect helped me a lot. One other subject I would say is social sciences, but geography specifically is something that I like, even though most people don't like it. The way we used to chart things on the map, or look at mountains and plateaus and make the differentiation really helped me understand or get a better picture of how it is outside.
I think back in school, one of my favorite subjects was ironically physics. I really like the derivations and the theorems, and you can actually apply a lot of that to photography right now. You can, like, the first thing I learned in photography was the derivation of light, the theorem around it, and I think it translates right now as well because everything is physics at the end of the day. It's all reacting to nature and a certain law. But
I think I was really interested in arts and craft as a student. Apart from that, yeah, I think I really liked biology because we had all these diagrams that we had to make. And then again, like, I really enjoyed geometry again, you know. So like, I have had like a fascination or an inclination towards subjects, or even chemistry for that matter, when we had to create all those molecular bonds and everything. Don't remember much now, but yeah, like, those were aspects that I actually enjoyed.
Personally, like, since I consider myself a visual learner, like, I do this thing called sketchnoting. So that way, like, I'm constantly like visually representing whatever is taught to me, and then it's easier for me to like go back and access that, and like even in terms of recall, because it's a very like intuitive and quick process. Like when I'm looking at my notes, I immediately am able to remember what happened in the class. So there's like an association that happens there. So I think that could be encouraged a lot.
Yeah. Can you like speak more about sketchnoting? What is it exactly?
Okay, so it's essentially it's a process of like actually taking down notes, but you use colors and you use certain visual cues to make your notes more accessible, right? So meaning if I had to write a heading, it would generally be in a bigger font, or it would have like a banner or something indicating that it's a heading. And then if I have like subheadings, then I would probably make it like slightly smaller, use a different color, so that when I look at it, I know that this is the key concept or this is the key thing that I'm talking about. Then generally also I try to insert graphics into it, and when I organize my sketch notes, I don't write like across the whole page, because that doesn't really help with your eye movement. Because you know, if your eye is just in one place, you're able to like scroll down faster, then you can read more quickly. So my sketch notes are also organized maybe just like 5-6 words in a line, and then I use the rest of the page for something else. So but of course, like each person can sort of adapt to their own style, use the kind of headers or banners that you want to use, or even the way that I might visualize a particular concept could be very different from the way someone else does it. So it's a very personalized process as well. But there are some basic tips and hacks that you can get in.
Like, even if you look at a graphic novel, even though they're just like stills, and you know, there's a show made on the same book, even the stills do such a great job at capturing the entire scene, or like, you know, how it's created, like, you know, the setting, you know, what's happening inside, and then there's conversation happening between two characters. So like how they build upon it, and then, you know, like if you're just reading it, it might be hard for you to, you know, create a visual description. Across Silk Roads in second year of my college, because I was really fascinated by history and I wanted to learn more, and I got the book. It was so hard for me. It was such a text heavy, information heavy book, and such a big book, like, and I'm someone who gets distracted very easily, like very easily. I could not like go past, like, I didn't even read 10 pages of that book. But then like very recently I came across like this illustrated version of the same book, and I just love reading it, even though there are like it's not like, you know, it has a lot of images, but just little bit of detailing in the book and like using elements like these make it really fun for me to, you know, stay engaged with the text for a longer period of time, which is really helpful for me as a person, because otherwise I would never be able to finish a book.
yeah, I think they definitely do. I think people should promote more of visual learning. Actually, forget visual learning, truthful learning. Visual learning is a form of truthful learning, but it's still truthful learning at the end of the day. Like, so much of what we read and study is jargonized for no reason, and it just setting apart a certain section of society that would understand that jargon. But it's also creating a sort of discrimination for people who cannot do that. So I think visual learning sort of eliminates that barrier. And when you're looking at dialogues and looking at animations and text in video with music and sound, it sort of creates the most conducive environment for assimilating that information, and it doesn't get too tiring also after a point. Like, you just want to keep going. I think one thing that educational institutes should work on is building on the research. Like, they don't build on the credibility of a video. Videos usually start as a starting point, that if you want to get introduced to a subject or a topic, you watch the video and then you go to the research. I think there is much more potential, like it can be explored, but that is only if people give it the credibility it deserves. Medium of learning I really like is documentaries. Like, I feel like when I'm researching something and if I watch a documentary about it, it sort of helps you understand the subject a lot better, because I feel like a documentary is a undiluted perspective. You get the interview's first-hand experience. It's not converted into some form of jargonized saying like an academic paper would. It's sort of pure and truthful, and then you can basically interpret from that. You can decide if that's true or not. So I think documentaries and videos really help.
So even when I'm designing a tattoo for someone, or before we begin the whole process of creating a tattoo, I usually like to understand what forms people are more comfortable with. Like, we can have geometric figures, we can have different colors, you can have so many things that you can play around with to create that visual, and it doesn't have to be in the most realistic form, but how sort of symbolism can be brought into it, and how that's used to then generate meaning that could be particular to that individual getting the tattoo, but it also then has a wider meaning because we're attributing that meaning to it. Like, a triangle then isn't just a triangle, it can represent 3 very different aspects of your life. It can represent your past, present and future, or it could mean anything depending on the meaning you attribute to it. So I do feel that when it comes to tattooing, it is a very strong visual medium through which people express themselves, and one that gives you the freedom to go in whatever direction you want, attach meaning to things based on your subjective experience, and take it from there.
So I'm basically I have a page called What's Your Crack, and that's basically understanding, it's trying to ask the viewer a question of what keeps you going and what are you passionate about. So more often than not, we get caught up in life and the rut of it, that we don't realize that we need passion or fire to keep us going and keep us fueled through something. So it's just asking you what keeps you going.
So just an example of how I've worked with different fellows in the YF to use visual mediums to kind of express what we've learned in different courses. So for example, this was a series that we did for the subject ecosophy. And this is one of my favorite works of art from that course. And in this work of art, we were trying to portray how we're ripping nature apart in the name of urbanization and globalization. And you can see the photograph kind of depicts the building, and it's kind of tattered. And the series, it started with sketches and paintings, and towards the end, the series ends with a photograph. So we were also kind of trying to portray, natural coming to a more synthetic, urbanized atmosphere with the photograph.